The sun had just started to rise, casting a soft glow across the quiet neighborhood. Birds chirped on the telephone wires as a teenage boy hurried down the sidewalk, his backpack slung over one shoulder and a basketball tucked under his arm. He was running a bit late for practice, but his mood was light. He had been working hard to make the starting lineup this season, and his coach had promised to give him more playing time if he kept improving. He put in his earbuds, nodding along to his favorite song, unaware that this ordinary morning was about to take a sharp turn. He stopped by a small corner store he visited often. The cashier smiled when he walked in, recognizing him right away. He grabbed a bottle of water and a snack, paid, and stepped outside, adjusting his headphones as he continued walking toward the school gym. The streets were still quiet except for the hum of cars passing in the distance. Everything seemed peaceful. But just as he turned the corner, he noticed a patrol car slowing down near the curb. The car stopped and two police officers stepped out. They exchanged a quick look before one of them called out to him. At first he thought maybe they needed directions or wanted to ask a question. He pulled out one earbud, his steps slowing. "Hey, you! Stop for a second," one of the officers said. He stopped, confused. "Yes, sir?" he asked politely. The officer's expression was serious. "We got a call about a suspicious person in this area. You match the description. Mind showing some ID?" The boy blinked, trying to process the words. "Suspicious person? Him?" He was wearing his basketball hoodie with the school logo right across the chest. He reached for his pocket, his voice calm. Sure, it's in my bag. I'm just going to practice." The other officer moved closer. "Keep your hands where we can see them." He froze. His heart began to race. The sudden tension in their tone made him nervous. He slowly raised his hands. "Okay. I just have my ID in here," he said, motioning toward his backpack. "We'll get it. Just keep your hands up," one of them said sharply. A few people nearby stopped to watch. The air grew heavier. The teen felt the weight of their stares and the sharpness of the officer's eyes on him. He didn't understand what was happening. He had never been in trouble before. He didn't even know what kind of person they were looking for. The first officer started asking questions. "Where are you coming from? Where's your ID? What are you doing around here?" The questions came fast, one after another. He answered each one as calmly as he could. "I just came from the store. I'm heading to basketball practice. High school's right over there." He pointed down the street, but the officer didn't seem convinced. He looked him up and down, his hand still near his belt. "You sure about that?" he asked. His tone made the boy's stomach twist. "Yes, sir," he said quietly. A group of kids across the street had started recording on their phones. One of them whispered something, and another said softly, "That's just Jordan from the basketball team." The sound of murmurs filled the air. The tension built with every second. The boy wished he could disappear, wished someone would step in and tell them they were making a mistake. The officers began to talk to each other in low voices. He could hear fragments, matches the call. "Black hoodie." Near the store, they didn't seem to care that his hoodie literally had his school's name written across it. He stood still, afraid that any sudden move would make things worse. "I can call my mom," he said carefully. "She works nearby." One of the officers shot him a sharp look. "Don't reach for anything." His chest tightened. He nodded quickly, trying not to make eye contact. He could feel his palms sweating. He looked around and saw a few people shaking their heads. Someone said, "He didn't do anything," but no one dared to step closer. The first officer took a step forward. "Turn around," he said. The boy hesitated. "Sir, I didn't do anything. Why, turn around?" The officer repeated, louder this time. The boy's throat went dry. He slowly turned around, his heart hammering in his chest. The other officer moved behind him. He could hear the sound of radios crackling, a voice saying something about backup and matching description. It didn't make sense. How could this be happening? He stood still, afraid to breathe too hard. His mind was spinning, thinking of all the stories he had seen on the news, all the things his mom had warned him about. She had always said, "If you ever get stopped, stay calm, keep your hands visible, and speak politely." He was doing all of that, and yet it didn't seem to help. A cold breeze passed, brushing against his face. The basketball rolled away from his feet and bounced onto the road. He watched helplessly as it kept rolling, the sound of it hitting the asphalt echoing in his ears. That simple, everyday sound suddenly felt distant, like something from another world. The officers began to search his backpack. They found nothing but his gym clothes, his ID, and a few snacks. One of them pulled out the ID and frowned. "This you?" he asked, though it was clearly his picture. "Yes, sir," he said softly. The officer didn't apologize. He just looked at it for a moment, then back at him. "You live around here?" "Yes, just a few blocks away," he said. His voice shook slightly. He wanted to go home, but more than that, he wanted this moment to end. Another minute passed, but it felt much longer. The crowd around them had grown. People whispered. A few shouted that it wasn't right. The officers ignored them, pretending not to hear. The teen could feel the lump in his throat growing. He wanted to call his mom so badly, but he didn't dare move without permission. Then one of the officers spoke into his radio again. His voice was quieter this time. Whatever he heard in response made him pause. He looked uncertain now, his earlier confidence slipping. He handed the ID back and said, "You can go," just like that. No explanation, no apology, as if the past 10 minutes hadn't happened. The boy didn't move right away. His knees felt weak, his hands trembling slightly. "Am I free to leave?" he asked softly. "Yeah," the officer said quickly, avoiding his eyes. He nodded slowly and bent to pick up his backpack. The crowd started to disperse, a few people patting him on the shoulder or saying, "Hang in there." He managed a faint nod but didn't say anything. His throat felt tight as he walked away, his legs felt heavy. His mind kept replaying the moment the officers had stepped out of the car. The sound of their voices, the coldness in their eyes. It didn't feel real, but the fear in his chest told him it was. He had done everything right, yet somehow that hadn't been enough. He stopped for a second, looking down at his hands. They were still shaking. He clenched them into fists, then loosened them again, trying to calm himself. The store he had just come from was now far behind him. The world felt different, not the same friendly neighborhood he'd known his whole life. He checked his phone. There were missed calls from his mom. He hadn't realized how much time had passed. He took a deep breath and texted her that he was fine, that he was on his way to practice. He didn't tell her what had happened, not yet. He didn't want her to worry. As he reached the gym, the familiar sound of sneakers squeaking on the court filled the air. His teammates were laughing, playing around carefree. He forced a small smile and joined them, trying to shake off what had just happened. But deep down, he couldn't. The image of those flashing lights, the harsh tone of the officers' voices, the helplessness he felt, it all stayed with him. He didn't know that his mother would soon find out. He didn't know that the same calm woman who had always told him to stay composed would soon show a side no one expected. For now, all he wanted was to play ball and pretend everything was normal, but something inside him had changed. The innocence of a simple morning walk was gone, replaced by a quiet fear he couldn't name. And though he didn't realize it yet, this moment was only the beginning of something much bigger. When he got home that evening, the house was quiet. The boy dropped his bag by the door and sat on the couch. The TV was on, but he wasn't really watching. His mind kept replaying what had happened that morning. Every time he tried to shake it off, the sound of the officers' voices came back to him. The way they had looked at him, the way everyone stared as if he was guilty of something he didn't even understand. He told himself not to overthink it, that maybe it was all a misunderstanding. But deep down, he couldn't ignore the fear he had felt when one of the officers told him to turn around. It was the kind of fear that stayed in your bones even after it was over. His mom wasn't home yet. She was still at work, probably stuck in a long meeting. He knew her job at the bureau kept her busy, but she always made time to check on him. She was strong, calm, and had this way of making people listen when she spoke. He admired that about her. If she had been there this morning, he knew things would have been different. Just thinking that gave him a little comfort. He went to his room, changed into fresh clothes, and tried to focus on homework. But he couldn't. His hands still shook a little whenever he remembered the officers shouting. He picked up his phone and saw messages from friends asking if he was okay. Someone had recorded part of what happened, and the video was already spreading around the school. He felt a chill as he read the comments. Most people were supportive, saying it wasn't right, but some doubted his side of the story. That hurt more than he expected. He put the phone down, turned off the light, and sat in the dark for a while. He didn't want to tell his mom about it. She had enough to worry about. Besides, he wasn't sure how to explain it without breaking down. but she always had a way of finding things out. It was close to 8 p.m. when her car pulled into the driveway. The sound of the engine was a relief. She walked in, still wearing her dark suit and carrying her briefcase. "Hey, champ," she said with a smile. "How was practice?" He hesitated, forcing a small smile. "It was fine." She studied his face. "You sure? You look tired." "I'm fine, Mom," he said quickly. He didn't want her to press, but she always noticed when something was off. She set her bag down and walked over to him. "You're not a good liar, you know that? What happened?" He sighed, looking down at his hands. "It's nothing, really, just something weird on the way to practice." "What kind of weird?" she asked, her voice calm but sharp, the kind that always made people tell the truth. He took a breath. "Some cops stopped me this morning. Said I looked suspicious." Her body stiffened slightly. "What?" "Yeah," he said quietly. "They thought I was someone else, I guess. Made me stand there while they checked my bag. A bunch of people were watching." He tried to sound casual, but his voice cracked near the end. Her expression changed instantly. The calm in her face turned into something else, controlled anger. "Did they touch you?" "No," he said quickly. "They just yelled a lot. Told me not to move." She exhaled slowly, trying to steady her voice. "Did you get their names? Their badge numbers?" He shook his head. "No, I just wanted to get out of there." She walked over to the table and grabbed her phone. Her fingers moved quickly, typing something. Where exactly did this happen? He told her the street near the small store he always went to. She knew the area well. It was only a few miles away. She nodded slowly, her mind already racing. "Okay," she said softly. "I'll take care of it." He frowned. "Mom, please don't make it a big deal." She looked at him, her eyes softening. "Sweetheart, this isn't about making a big deal. It's about making sure this doesn't happen again, to you or anyone else." He didn't say anything after that. He trusted her, but a part of him was scared. He didn't want to see her angry. When his mom got serious, people listened. He'd seen her handle tough situations at work before, and she never lost her composure. But this was different. This time, it was personal. She went into her office and closed the door. He could hear her making calls, her tone calm but firm. She was speaking to someone from the local precinct, asking for details about a stop that matched her son's description. Her words were measured, her professionalism steady, but her jaw was tight. When she came out a half hour later, she sat beside him on the couch. "I spoke to the precinct," she said. "They confirmed there were 2 patrol cars in that area this morning. They'll be hearing from me again tomorrow." He nodded, unsure what to say. "I just don't want to make things worse." She turned toward him and placed a hand on his shoulder. "You didn't do anything wrong. Remember that. You were just walking to practice. The people who made you feel small, they're the ones who should be worried, not you." Her voice was firm, but there was sadness behind it. He could see how much this hurt her too. That night he couldn't sleep. He lay in bed staring at the ceiling, thinking about everything. He had always believed that hard work and good manners could keep him out of trouble. His mom had taught him that. But today had shown him that sometimes even that wasn't enough. The next morning, his mom left early. She told him to go to school as usual. When she kissed his forehead before leaving, her voice was calm again. "Don't worry about yesterday. Just focus on your day." But she wasn't calm inside. She spent the morning gathering information, calling contacts, and checking reports. Every officer on duty in that area would have to explain what happened. Her son's name appeared nowhere in their reports, which made it worse. That meant they had stopped him without officially recording it. By midday, she was standing in front of the local precinct, her badge clipped to her belt. She introduced herself to the desk sergeant, her voice steady but cold. Within minutes, the 2 officers from the previous day were called into the room. The moment they saw her badge, their expressions changed. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't have to. She asked simple questions. "What was the call you responded to? What description did you have? Why was my son detained?" The officers stammered through answers, avoiding eye contact. They talked about a vague report, a misunderstanding, an apology that didn't sound sincere. She listened quietly, her arms crossed, her expression unreadable. When they finished, she said, "That boy you stopped yesterday was my son. He was on his way to school. He cooperated. He was polite. He did everything right. And yet you treated him like a criminal." One of the officers swallowed hard. Ma'am, we didn't mean. She held up her hand. Intent doesn't erase what happened. You're lucky nothing worse occurred. Her voice dropped lower, controlled and powerful. Next time you make assumptions, remember that behind that badge you represent more than authority. You represent trust. And yesterday you failed it. The room fell silent. Even the desk sergeant didn't say a word. She finished the conversation by filing an official complaint and left the building without looking back. Meanwhile, at school, her son was trying to move on with his day. His friends had questions, his teachers noticed his quietness, but he just smiled and said he was fine. He wanted to believe things would go back to normal. That afternoon, when he got home, his mom was waiting for him. She looked calmer now. "It's handled," she said simply. He nodded. "What did they say?" "Exactly what I expected," she said. "They called it a mistake. But I made sure they understood it can't happen again." He felt a wave of relief but also guilt. "I'm sorry, Mom, I didn't mean to cause trouble." She smiled faintly and pulled him into a hug. "You didn't cause trouble. You just existed. That's not something to apologize for." He closed his eyes for a moment, the tension easing out of his body. For the first time since that morning, he felt safe. Later that night, as they had dinner together, his mom said quietly, "I know you're strong, but I need you to remember something. The world doesn't always see people for who they are. Sometimes it only sees what it wants to see. Don't ever forget your worth no matter how others treat you." He nodded, the words sinking deep into his heart. He knew she was right. He also knew this wasn't the end of it. Something inside him had changed forever. He had seen fear, unfairness, and the quiet strength of his mother, all in one day. As he went to bed that night, he realized he wasn't just her son anymore. He was part of something bigger. A story about standing tall even when the world tried to make you small. The next few days passed quietly, but a tension hung in the air that neither of them talked about. The boy tried to act normal, going to school, spending time with his friends, and keeping busy with basketball practice. But deep down, he knew his mom was still angry. Not the kind of loud anger that fades after a few hours, but the quiet kind that stays, like a low fire burning under the surface. Every morning, she left the house earlier than usual. He could tell she was working on something related to what happened, though she didn't say much about it. He respected her space. He knew when she had that focused look in her eyes, it was best to let her be. But he also knew she wasn't just letting it go. One afternoon, he was walking home after practice when he noticed a patrol car parked on the street near their house. His stomach tightened. He hesitated for a second, wondering if they were there for him. But then he saw his mother standing in the driveway, talking to the same two officers from before. Her tone was calm but firm, her body language controlled. He couldn't hear what they were saying, but from the way the officers nodded and avoided her eyes, he could tell she was making a point they couldn't argue with. He slowed his steps, trying not to interrupt, but his mom noticed him and gave a small wave to let him know it was okay. The officers left a few minutes later, and she turned to him with a faint smile. "Everything all right?" he asked carefully. "Yes," she said, brushing invisible dust from her sleeve. "They just came to follow up. I made sure they understand what a follow-up really means." He smiled nervously. "You didn't scare them too much, did you?" She gave a small laugh, but her eyes stayed serious. Sometimes people need to be reminded that their power comes with responsibility. "I'm not here to scare them. I'm here to make them think before they act." He nodded, though he could sense the unspoken frustration behind her calm words. She had always taught him to be kind, patient, and respectful. But now, he saw another side of her, the one that stood firm when fairness was ignored. That evening, while he did his homework, she was on the phone again, this time speaking to someone from the city office. Her tone remained steady, but he could hear the edge of determination. When she hung up, she sighed and looked at him from across the room. "Do you know why I'm doing this?" she asked softly. He shrugged. "Because they were wrong?" "Yes," she said, walking over to sit beside him. "But also because silence gives permission. If we stay quiet, they think it's okay, and I can't let them think that. Not when it could happen to someone else's child." He looked down at his notebook, not sure what to say. Part of him wanted to forget it all, to move on. But another part understood exactly what she meant. What happened to him wasn't just about him anymore. That weekend, they visited his grandmother, who lived a few towns away. She made their favorite dinner and filled the house with laughter. For a while, it felt like everything was normal again, but when the boy stepped outside later that night to get some fresh air, his grandmother joined him on the porch. "Your mother told me what happened," she said quietly. He glanced at her. "She did?" She nodded. "She worries about you more than she says. You know she's seen things most people haven't. That's why she gets so serious about this stuff." He looked out at the street, the warm night air wrapping around them. "I just don't get why they stopped me. I wasn't doing anything wrong." His grandmother sighed, her eyes soft. "Sometimes people see what they expect, not what's real. The important thing is that you don't let their fear change how you see yourself." Her words stayed with him long after that night. By Monday, things started to move quickly. His mom had requested a formal review of the officers involved. The local police department released a statement calling it a misunderstanding, but many in the community weren't satisfied. The video of the stop had spread online, reaching people beyond their neighborhood. Messages of support poured in, but there were also harsh comments, people arguing in ways that made the boy uncomfortable. One morning, as he waited outside school, a classmate approached him. "Hey, I saw that video. That was crazy. You okay?" He nodded. "Yeah, I'm fine now. Your mom's like an agent, right?" the classmate asked. He hesitated before answering. "Yeah, she works for the bureau," the other kid whistled softly. "Man, those cops picked the wrong person to mess with." He smiled awkwardly, not knowing how to respond. It was strange hearing people talk about it like a movie when, to him, it still felt raw and real. That afternoon when he got home, his mom was in the living room reading a report. She looked up when he entered. "How was your day?" "It was okay," he said, setting his bag down. "People keep talking about the video," she sighed. "I know. I wish I could stop it from spreading, but it's out there now. Maybe it's not all bad. Sometimes the truth needs to be seen." He sat beside her, curious. "Did something happen today?" "Yes," she said. "The chief called me. They're launching an internal review. I'm going to meet with them tomorrow." "Do you have to go alone?" he asked quietly. She smiled faintly. "I can handle it. But thank you for worrying about me." The next day she dressed in her work clothes, crisp suit, calm expression, hair neatly tied back. She drove to the police headquarters, the same quiet fire burning in her chest. The meeting room was full. A few senior officers, a city representative, and the 2 officers from that morning. She introduced herself formally, but everyone already knew who she was. She didn't raise her voice, and she didn't accuse. Instead, she spoke with the same calm, focused energy that had carried her through years in the field. She explained what had happened to her son, how he had been stopped without cause, questioned, and humiliated in public. Then she talked about what it meant beyond just one incident, how moments like that destroy trust, how they make good people afraid of those meant to protect them. By the time she finished, the room was silent. No one dared interrupt. The chief cleared his throat and promised that steps would be taken, training, accountability, and proper review. Whether it would truly change anything, she didn't know, but she had said what needed to be said, and that mattered. When she got home that evening, her son was waiting on the porch. "How did it go?" he asked. "It went well enough," she said. "I made sure they listened." He nodded. "You always make people listen," she smiled, though her eyes softened. "That's because sometimes the truth is louder than any voice." They sat there quietly for a while, watching the sunset. Neither spoke much, but the silence between them was peaceful this time. Later that week, something unexpected happened. One of the officers who had stopped him came to their door. The boy froze when he saw the uniform, but his mom stepped forward, calm as always. The officer looked nervous, his hand slightly trembling. "I came to apologize," he said. "I didn't realize. I didn't handle things the right way that day. I'm sorry." The boy stood there, unsure what to feel. His mother looked at the officer for a moment before replying. "Apology accepted," she said. "But I hope you understand it's not about me. It's about everyone you meet after this. See them for who they are, not what you fear they might be." The officer nodded slowly. "Yes, ma'am. I understand." Then he turned and walked away. The boy looked at his mom, surprised. "You forgave him?" "Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting," she said softly. "It just means you choose peace over bitterness. And peace takes strength." That night, as he lay in bed, he felt lighter. The fear that had followed him since that day started to fade. His mother's calm strength had changed everything, not just for him, but for the people who had wronged him too. He realized that sometimes power doesn't come from shouting or fighting. Sometimes it comes from standing firm, speaking truth, and showing compassion even when the world doesn't deserve it. And as he drifted to sleep, he finally felt something he hadn't in a long time. Safe. Renee parked her car a few blocks away from the flashing lights and loud voices echoing through the street. She didn't even need to ask what was happening. Something in her heart told her it was about her son. Her phone was still buzzing with messages from a neighbor who had seen everything start. Without wasting a second, she grabbed her badge from the dashboard and stepped out. Her heartbeat was steady, but her chest felt tight with worry. The closer she got, the more she could hear the tension in the air. People were murmuring, some recording on their phones. At the center of it all, she saw her boy on the ground with his hands behind his head. 2 officers stood near him, one shouting instructions while the other kept a hand near his weapon. For a second, time seemed to stop for Renee. The sight of her child in that position hit her harder than anything she had faced in her years on the job. She walked straight toward the scene. Her voice was calm but firm when she spoke. "That's my son," she said, flashing her badge as she moved past the crowd. The officers turned, surprised. One of them started to protest, telling her to stay back, but she didn't slow down. The gold letters of her badge caught the light as she held it high. "FBI," she said clearly. "I'm Special Agent Carter. Step away from him." The words landed like a shockwave. The older officer's expression changed instantly. The tension in his shoulders loosened, and he took a step back, clearly realizing what he had just walked into. The younger officer looked unsure, glancing between Renee and his partner, not knowing what to say. The crowd had gone quiet now, watching the scene unfold. Renee moved beside her son, crouching down slowly. "You okay?" she whispered. He nodded, eyes wide, still shaking from fear and confusion. She could tell he was trying to stay strong, but she knew how scared he must have been. Her heart ached, but she kept her face calm. She helped him to his feet, her arm firm around his shoulders. "Can someone tell me what reason you had for detaining him?" she asked, turning back to the officers. Her voice stayed even, but there was steel underneath it. The older officer cleared his throat. "We got a call about a possible suspect matching his description," he said, his tone much softer now. Renee raised an eyebrow. "A suspect?" He was walking home from practice with a basketball bag. What exactly made him look suspicious? Her eyes didn't blink, and the silence that followed was heavy. The officer looked uncomfortable. "Ma'am, it was a misunderstanding," he finally said. "We didn't mean—" Renee cut him off. "You didn't mean to? You pointed your weapon at a teenager who did nothing wrong." She didn't raise her voice, but every word hit hard. The younger officer looked down, guilt written all over his face. The crowd started whispering again, and a few people kept their phones up, recording everything. Renee knew this moment mattered, not just for her son, but for every parent who feared the same thing. She didn't want to humiliate anyone, but accountability was necessary. "Next time," she said slowly, "take a moment to see the person, not the stereotype. He's a kid, a good kid, and you could have destroyed his life in a second." One of the officers started to apologize again, but she raised her hand slightly. "Save it. We can discuss this properly at the station. Right now, my son needs to go home." She turned back to her son, who was still standing quietly, trying to process everything. His breathing was shallow, his hands trembling a little. Renee guided him away from the flashing lights and the stairs. Every step she took, she felt the eyes of the crowd following them, and she knew this moment would stay with everyone who had seen it. When they reached the car, Jordan finally spoke. His voice was small. I thought they were going to." He couldn't finish the sentence. Renee put her arms around him, pulling him close. "I know," she said softly. "You're safe now. I'm here." He buried his face in her shoulder, and for the first time that evening she let a tear slip down her cheek. The strong agent who faced danger without blinking now felt like any mother who had just seen her child in harm's way. After a few moments, she helped him into the car and sat beside him for a while before starting the engine. She didn't rush to leave. She wanted him to have time to breathe. Across the street, the officers were talking quietly, glancing their way. Renee knew they would have a lot to answer for. But she also knew anger alone wouldn't fix anything. What mattered most now was her son's peace of mind. On the drive home, the silence between them felt heavy but full of understanding. The city lights passed by like slow flashes of memory. every one of them reminding her of what could have happened. Finally, Jordan broke the silence. "They didn't even ask me what I was doing," he said. "They just told me to stop and get on the ground." His voice cracked a little. Renee reached over and rested her hand on his. "You didn't do anything wrong," she said firmly. "You hear me? You were respectful. You stayed calm. That's all you could do." He nodded but kept staring out the window. "Do you think they'll get in trouble?" he asked quietly. Renee took a deep breath. "There will be consequences," she said. "But what's more important is that we make sure this doesn't happen to someone else. That's the real work." When they finally pulled into their driveway, the night had settled deep and quiet. Renee parked the car and turned off the lights. The house looked peaceful, just the way she liked it, but tonight it felt different. She realized that no matter how safe a neighborhood looked, fear could find its way in. Inside, she poured 2 glasses of water and handed one to her son. He sat at the kitchen table, shoulders slumped, his eyes still lost in what had just happened. Renee sat across from him, taking a slow sip before speaking again. "You know, when I joined the Bureau, I thought I could make the world safer," she said. "But sometimes it's still the small things that remind me how much work we have left to do." He looked up at her, his eyes red. "You did make it safer," he said softly. "You showed up for me." Those words made her chest tighten. She reached across the table and took his hand. "Always," she said. "No matter what. You're my whole world." A few minutes later, the doorbell rang. It was one of the neighbors, the same woman who had texted Renee earlier. She looked worried but relieved. "I just wanted to check if everything's okay," she said. Renee nodded and thanked her, assuring her they were fine. The neighbor hesitated. "I recorded what happened," she added quietly. "If you need it for anything." Renee smiled gently. "Thank you," she said. "That might help." The woman nodded and left, and Renee closed the door, locking it behind her. Back in the kitchen, her son was scrolling through his phone. The videos were already online. Comments were pouring in, some supportive, others angry. Renee knew how fast things spread. She didn't like the idea of their faces online, but maybe, just maybe, this could make a difference. She placed a hand on his shoulder. "Don't look at those tonight," she said softly. "Let's rest. We'll deal with everything tomorrow." He nodded and put the phone face down. They sat together for a while, the quiet wrapping around them like a blanket. Outside, the world was still buzzing, lights still flashing in the distance, but inside their home, it was peaceful again. Before heading to bed, Renee walked to the living room window and looked out at the street. The same street she had always thought was safe. She knew she couldn't change everything overnight, but she made herself a silent promise. Tomorrow she would file her report, make her calls, and ensure that what happened today would not be brushed aside. But for now, she allowed herself to breathe. Her son was safe, and that, more than anything, was what mattered tonight. The next morning, sunlight filled the kitchen as Renee made breakfast quietly. The smell of toast and coffee mixed with the sound of birds outside. It almost felt like a normal morning, but both she and her son knew nothing about this day would be ordinary. The night before had changed something deep inside them. The peace they used to take for granted now felt fragile, like it could break any time. Jordan came down the stairs slowly, still tired. His eyes looked heavy, and he moved as if he was still carrying the weight of what had happened. He sat at the table, and for a while, neither of them said anything. Renee poured him a glass of juice and finally spoke. "Did you sleep at all?" He nodded a little. "Not much," he said softly. "Every time I closed my eyes, I saw those lights again." Renee understood that feeling all too well. She had seen those lights in her own work. Moments where danger felt too close, but it was different when it involved your child. She reached out and squeezed his hand gently. "It's going to take some time," she said. "But you're safe now. We'll work through it together." After breakfast, she went to her home office. Her laptop was open, the incident report already started. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard for a moment as she tried to find the right words. Every sentence mattered. She wasn't writing this just as a mother. She was writing as someone who had taken an oath to protect people and stand up for justice. She described everything in detail. The call, the officer's behavior, the lack of probable cause, and the emotional toll on her son. She included the videos from bystanders that neighbors had shared with her. Each clip showed the truth she wanted the department to see. When she was done, she read it once more and sent it through official channels. Then she sat back in her chair, staring at the wall. She didn't feel relief yet. She knew the process would take time, and she also knew not every story like this got the justice it deserved. But she had to try. Later that afternoon, the doorbell rang. When she opened the door, it was the same senior officer from the night before. He stood there, hat in hand, looking uneasy. "Agent Carter," he began, his tone cautious. "I just wanted to apologize again for what happened last night. It shouldn't have gone that way." Renee looked at him for a long moment. She could see the guilt in his eyes. And while part of her wanted to stay angry, another part saw the human being standing in front of her. "Thank you for saying that," she replied quietly. "But you understand this isn't just about my son, right? It's about every young man who's been treated like that for no reason." He nodded slowly. "I do," he said. "I'll be honest, it made me think. We're supposed to protect people, not scare them. I've already asked for more bias training for our unit. I don't want this happening again." That caught Renee a little by surprise. She hadn't expected him to go that far. "That's a start," she said. "Change doesn't happen overnight, but it starts with people willing to see the problem." He nodded again, thanked her, and left. As the door closed, Renee let out a long breath. It wasn't closure, but it was something. Maybe even hope. Later that evening, she and her son went for a walk around the neighborhood. The sunset painted the sky in warm shades of gold and pink. It was peaceful, and for the first time since the incident, Jordan smiled a little. "Mom," he said quietly, "are you mad at them?" She thought for a second. "I was angry," she said honestly. "But more than angry, I was scared. You didn't deserve what happened. No one does. But holding on to anger won't change what they did. What will change things is how we move forward." He nodded, kicking a small stone on the sidewalk. "It's just weird," he said. "I never thought something like that would happen to me." Renee put an arm around his shoulders as they walked. "Sometimes life surprises us in the hardest ways," she said. "But those moments can also make us stronger. You didn't do anything wrong, and I want you to remember that every time you doubt yourself." They kept walking until they reached the park. Kids were playing, laughing, chasing each other under the orange sky. Watching them, Renee felt a quiet ache in her heart. Every parent there probably shared the same silent wish, to never see their child in danger, to always protect them from a world that could be unfair. The next few days were busy. Calls came in from reporters who had seen the video online, but Renee refused to speak publicly. She didn't want this to turn into a media circus. She only wanted justice and awareness. Meanwhile, messages from strangers flooded her inbox, some sharing support, others telling their own painful stories. Each one reminded her that this was bigger than her family. At school, Jordan noticed the change too. Some classmates came up to him, saying they'd seen the video and were glad he was okay. A few avoided talking about it, not sure what to say. His coach checked on him and told him to take time off if he needed it. But Jordan didn't want to hide. He wanted to get back to his normal life, even if it didn't feel the same anymore. One afternoon, after practice, he stayed behind with a few teammates. They talked about what had happened. One of them said quietly, "Man, that could have been any of us." Jordan nodded. "Yeah," he said. "But maybe now people will start listening." At home that night, Renee watched her son from the kitchen window as he sat on the porch, lost in thought. She joined him with 2 mugs of hot cocoa. "You're thinking a lot," she said softly. He smiled a little. "Just trying to understand it all." Renee looked up at the stars. "Sometimes we don't get to understand everything," she said. "But we can use what happens to help others. That's what matters." He turned to her. "You think that's what I should do?" She nodded. "If you want. Speak your truth. People listen more when it comes from the heart." The next week, Jordan did something unexpected. His school held an assembly about community and respect, and he asked if he could share his story.